You stand in your kitchen, remarking that it smells like summer, even in January. Jars lined up, not matching, not perfect, but full. Deep reds, dusty greens, and soft golds. Each one carries a story, not a brand name, not a barcode, a memory. Maybe it's basil you cut just before the first frost, or peppers you forgot about until they turned fire engine red on the vine. Maybe it's cilantro that bolted before you could use it, and instead of cursing it, you let it finish its life and give you seeds. For most of human history, this was normal. Flavor didn't come from a store, it came from attention. From watching plants change, letting them complete their cycle, and understanding that preservation wasn't about hoarding, it was about respect. Today we're talking about how to supply your herb and seasoning cabinet directly from the garden. Woohoo! What you can grow, how to process it, how to store it, and why this practice connects us to something much older than modern homesteading trends. Because your spice cabinet, it's not just culinary. It's historical, it's political, and it's powerful. Welcome, witches, pagans, heathens, spiritualists, and anyone interested in living sustainably. This is
Old Ways, New Days, where the old ways meet the good dirt.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Nell. And each week we explore the sacred art of living close to the land. From compost to covens, chickens to charms,
We're reclaiming self-sufficiency, seasonal living, and ancestral wisdom.
whether you're stirring your cauldron or your soup pot,
This is a space for wild-hearted folk walking the homesteading path with intention, magic, and muddy boots.
well, hello there. How's it going, Kayla?
Good! How are you doing, Nell?
Oh, not too bad.
You have a Delta? Is she purring yet?
Almost.
Almost?
I almost have her there. How was your day?
It was pretty decent. The weather's getting nicer here a little bit. That whole
The fake spring?
the fake spring. Yes, the false spring.
We have several of them. This is our first one.
Yes. So it's nice to to not be freezing when you're outside,
Yeah.
even if it is just for a couple of days.
Right. So today we're going to talk about herbs versus spices and a living distinction between the two of them.
Hi, Zelda.
She wants to say hi today.
Yeah, she's my senior kitty, 14 years old. Aren't you, baby girl?
Yup. Yeah.
She's got that grandma voice.
Who's in trouble now? So when we say herbs and spices, we tend to lump them together, but historically they meant very different things. Herbs are leafy, often used fresh or gently dried. They grow close to home. You can step outside and cut what you need. They were associated with everyday cooking, medicine, and household magic. Spices, on the other hand, were once rare, precious, and dangerous to acquire. Seeds, roots, bark, dried fruits, things that traveled well, things worth fighting over. But here's the bridge. Many spices begin their lives as herbs. When you let an herb finish its cycle, flower, seed, dry, you're stepping into that older tradition. You're saying, I'm not just harvesting flavor, I'm harvesting time. This shift from leaf to seed is the moment your garden becomes a pantry.
So modern gardening teaches us to harvest early. Young leaves, tender shoots, fresh flavor. Historically, that wasn't the whole picture. Spices came from maturity, from letting plants bolt, flowers, seed, dry, and harden. from accepting that a plant's usefulness doesn't end when it stops being tender. When we interrupt plants too early, we get freshness, but we lose preservation. This is an invitation to stop yanking plants out the moment they get leggy and instead ask, what are you trying to become? Let's talk specifics, because this is where empowerment lives. Your leafy herbs, which are your foundation, basil, oregano, thyme, sage, rosemary, parsley, dill, and then of course I want to start singing that song by Simon and Garfunkel.
Of course you do.
I know. These are the backbone of a home seasoning cabinet. Historically, they were grown right outside the kitchen door because they were used daily. These herbs are most potent right before flowering. Once they flower, the plant's energy shifts away from leaf production and towards reproduction. This doesn't make them useless, it just changes what they're best for. Harvest them intentionally, not in a rush, not all at once. Think relationship, not extraction. So seeds that become spices, this is where people realize they've been growing spices all along. Let's start with the most famous shapeshifter, cilantro.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's that trouble one.
Yeah, a lot of people know it, but they're like, ooh, you can definitely taste it.
Yes, especially if you have the gene that makes it taste like soap.
Yeah.
For many gardeners, cilantro is frustrating. It bolts quickly, it doesn't behave, it refuses to stay leafy. But once it bolts, it becomes coriander, one of the most important spices in human history, used across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. The same plant that disappoints fresh cooks fed spice routes. This isn't a gardening failure, it's a cultural misunderstanding.
Excuse you.
Yeah, excuse me. Let it go to seed. Let those seeds dry on the plant, and suddenly you have coriander, one of the most globally significant spices in history. Same goes for the following plants as well. Dill. Fresh dill is fleeting. Dill seed is forever. Historically, dill seed mattered more than dill weed. It stored well, traveled well, and flavored preserved foods through winter. Mustard greens are food. Mustard seed is chemistry. Heat doesn't exist until the seed is crushed and mixed with liquid. That reaction fascinated ancient cooks long before they understood why it worked. Some spices aren't spicy until you activate them. That's not accident, that's plant intelligence. A single plant can feed you twice, once as a leaf, once as a seed. That's not inefficiency, that's abundance culture.
Woohoo.
I know. Peppers and paprika. Paprika feels exotic until you realize it's just dried, ground, sweet red peppers. Bell peppers, pimento peppers, paprika varieties, left on the plant until fully red, then dried slowly, become one of the most versatile spices in the world. Historically, paprika was a way to preserve heat, sweetness, and color in climates where fresh peppers weren't available year-round. This is food security disguised as seasoning.
I think somebody's jealous.
Yeah, probably. Somebody is probably jealous. So your roots and your bulbs, these would be your garlics and your onion powders. These are pantry staples, but growing and drying them yourself reconnects you to their original purpose, preservation and protection. Garlic wasn't just flavor, it was medicine, it was warding, it was survival. The same can be said for ginger, turmeric, and horseradish. These roots that store underground, protected, and potent. Drying and grinding roots was how ancient cultures preserved medicine and warmth. Fresh root energizes fast, while dried roots sustains long. Drying doesn't... And there she goes.
Oh, and
there she goes. We are now catless.
For how long?
Right.
Who knows?
Yep. Right. Drying doesn't weaken plants, it changes how they work. Flowers also are in the spice world, and they become gold. Not all spices are about flavor. Some were about color. Calendula, petals added golden color to food, butter, and broths, called the poor man's saffron because saffron itself was so rare and expensive. Safflower, used as a dye and mild seasoning, is not a true saffron but symbolically powerful. In times of scarcity, color mattered. Golden food meant wealth, health, and celebration.
So now let's get on to trees, shrubs, and the long game.
Yeah, let's.
So some spices require patience measured in years. Bay laurel is a tree, not an herb bush. Juniper berries aren't berries at all. These plants were slow, steady, and deeply valued. Used sparingly because they took time to grow. Spices taught restraint, meaning you don't waste what took years to make.
Drying isn't about speed, it's about respect. With modern dehydration culture.
That's what she wanted. She wanted to play.
Yeah. Modern dehydration culture wants things fast. Historically, drying was slow on purpose. Air drying herbs preserves volatile oils better than high heat. Darkness matters. Stillness matters. Time matters. If your herbs smell faint once dried, they were brushed. If they crumble easily and release aroma when crushed, they were respected. Seeds need patience. Peppers need airflow. Roots need thorough dryness or they mold. Drying isn't prep work, it's the transformation phase.
So whole versus ground and how the ancestors preserved power. Now this is where modern convenience clashes with ancient wisdom. Whole spices last longer because their essential oils are protected inside the seed or root. Once you grind them, the clock starts ticking. Historically, spices were kept whole and ground fresh, not because people were romantic about it, but because it worked. Talking point. Grinding spices was often a daily or weekly ritual. Mortar and pestle wasn't aesthetic. It was practically technology. Storage mattered because spices were currency level value. Glass, ceramic, metal, never plastic, cool, dark, dry. A spice exposed to heat and light is a spice bleeding strength.
So there is a seasonal rhythm for your spice cabinet. This practice becomes sustainable when it follows the seasons. Spring is for greens and early herbs. Summer is for abundance and drying. Late summer and fall are for seeds and peppers. Winter is for grinding, blending, and reflection. This rhythm turns your cabinet into a calendar. You can look at a jar and remember when it was made. That's seasonal literacy. Tongue ties. And it's disappearing.
So now, the historical power of spices and how the world was seasoned. Now let's zoom out.
Okay.
Like way out. Keep going.
Global?
Yes.
Okay.
But like you're looking down at the earth.
Okay.
So you're out in space.
Sweet. I can't breathe. Okay.
So we're going to look at how spices shaped the world. They fueled trade routes, justified colonization, funded wars, and built empires. Black pepper was once worth its weight in gold. Nutmeg determined borders. Cinnamon crossed oceans. Spices mattered because they preserved food, masked spoilage, aided digestion, and carried medical properties long before refrigeration or modern medicine. So, what we now sprinkle casually was once guarded, taxed, and fought over. The spice trade connected continents and devastated others. Indigenous knowledge was extracted, lands were exploited, flavor came at a cost. When you grow your own spices, you quietly step out of that legacy. You're choosing sovereignty over supply chains. You're saying, I don't need conquest for flavor. I need patience.
So, why did we forget this knowledge? Well, industrial food flattened time. Grinding happens in factories, harvesting, it happens elsewhere. Spices arrive divorced from season, plant, and labor. We forgot that spices were once local or incredibly expensive, not disposable. When everything is available all the time, nothing feels precious. Growing your, growing your own spices, even if it's just one or two, restores that sense of value.
So every jar you fill is an act of remembrance. You're remembering how food used to work, how seasons mattered, how plants were allowed to finish their story, how flavor wasn't instant, it was earned.
A spice isn't a different plant, it's a familiar one left alone long enough to become something else.
When you let plants finish their cycle, you're not just growing food, you're growing memory, history, and resilience.
And once you see spices this way, you'll never look at a bolting plant the same again.
And when you open your cabinet in the dead of winter, you're not just seasoning a meal.
You're touching sunlight that trusted you enough to wait.